I'm going to mute everyone. And we'll unmute Julia. And you're up, Julia.
Cool. I'll just get my screen shared. And, without further ado, let's get started. So, hello everyone. Welcome to my first ever Zoom workshop. So why we're all here is to talk about imposter syndrome. Imposter syndrome is a phenomenon that is felt by a wide variety of people who work in a wide variety of fields, but it's often something that's rarely discussed and therefore rarely recognized. So today, we're going to talk about a couple different things about imposter syndrome. First, we're gonna like a little introduction to imposter syndrome, just so that I know that we're all on the same page. I'm gonna just outline the basics of what imposter syndrome is and what it's all about. Next, I'm going to talk about ways to combat imposter syndrome, to minimize it in your life. And then finally, we'll end the workshop by giving you the opportunity to ask me to elaborate on anything or to break out into smaller groups for further discussion. That's really just dealer's choice. So without further ado, let's get started. So, dictionary definition. Imposter syndrome is the persistent inability to believe that one's own success is deserved or has been legitimately achieved as a result of your own efforts or skills. Basically, you think you're a fraud who doesn't actually belong in some place or role because you can't see that you've earned your place at the table, even though you absolutely have. It's all about your relationship with your success and achievements and how you perceive yourself. And that's kind of ironic for a phenomenon that's largely born of comparing yourself to others. To me, one of the biggest reasons that imposter syndrome isn't talked about is because it shares so many qualities with a mental health issue, and that kind of renders it almost taboo. So today, we're going to break the silence and talk about what's going on inside our heads. So before we talk about ways to lower feelings of imposter syndrome, first I want us to be aware of factors that heighten it. So to start, we'll look at the odd one out. Basically, people who are the odd ones out in a group, when they have heightened sense of imposter syndrome, because when you stick out like a sore thumb, you begin to wonder how you ever got to be in such a group in the first place, and then you start to question whether or not you deserve to stay. So our favorite example in the tech industry goes as such. So the tech industry is predominantly male. Consequently, women in tech are more likely to feel feelings of imposter syndrome. They're more likely to think that they aren't like their coworkers and that they don't really deserve a place on the team. And the things that make them stand out, like the difference in gender, just kind of sets them apart. Additionally, people who are the odd ones out feel pressure to succeed, not only to do themselves justice, they feel like they need to succeed for everyone else who shares those odd one out qualities. And this kind of relates to imposter syndrome and perfectionism, and those two are usually linked. And I'm just going to give a quick example of what I mean when you feel pressure to prove yourself to others as opposed to just yourself. So let's say that there's this stereotype that women are bad at math, and I have a big math test coming up. I'm going to get super duper worried and nervous, and I'm going to put pressure on myself not to do super well on the test only because I want to get a good mark in this course. But I'm going to think I have to prove to my TA that girls can do math. I have to prove to my classmates that I can be better than them or just as good. And I have to prove to the prof that girls can be PhDs in math too. So that's just an example of ways that sort of these odd one out qualities can heighten your stress, which in turn can heighten your feelings of imposter syndrome. Okay, next, let's look at success. Now, I don't know about you, I was super surprised to learn that people who are more successful feel more feelings of imposter syndrome, because as a bystander, I'm able to see all their awards and their accolades and achievements, and I see it, I take it at face value. But since imposter syndrome is all up in your brain, it kind of paints a different picture. And I can't tell you firsthand what it's like in the mind of a successful person, but bear with me. Let's just learn about this. So I mentioned earlier that imposter syndrome is born from comparing yourself to others. When you're successful, so are the people you compare yourself to. And, as the saying goes, it's lonely at the top. There's less people to compare yourself to, and they're also super successful. So being super successful, comparing yourself to other successful people, that can make your level of imposter syndrome higher. Also, since there's less people when you're successful, you're more likely to feel like you're the odd one out on your team or around your peers, because there's just less people who are less likely to be like you. Conversely, if you're successful but no one treats you like it, or if you did something super well but no one recognized it, that can play tricks on your mind, and you can doubt yourself more, and then imposter syndrome just gets worse and worse. Whew. Okay, that's sort of just the basics, just some things that make imposter syndrome worse. So now that we kind of are all on the same page about what imposter syndrome is, we're gonna go to an activity. It hasn't been that long, but you might be sick of my voice. You might want to speak yourself. This is a workshop. So what we're going to do is, first, I'm just going to do an example of what this activity is, and then we're going to break out in the breakout rooms just so everyone has a chance to share their story. So how this works is one person will think of some self-deprecating thought that they've had recently due to imposter syndrome, and then they're going to share it with the group. And the rest of us, if we've also thought that thought, we're going to raise our hands. Now, that could be in real life, but there's also this fun little raise hand option if you go to the participation window on Zoom, and you can just raise your hand there. So without further ado, let's just start. I'll start. I'm going to give about 4 examples, and then I think by then we'll be ready to break off into our own little rooms. So this is a thought that I've had because of imposter syndrome. I am so not qualified to talk to all these people about this thing. If you've ever thought that before, raise your hand. In real life, but preferably on Zoom. I see a lot of hands raised, and the number just keeps going up and up. It tells me that there's 9 right now. I really like this activity. I think it really goes to show that the thoughts in our heads that seem so specific to ourselves, and so they're so brutal and self-deprecating, you think that, they could only possibly exist in your own mind, but then it turns out that a bunch of people have them. Here's another one. So if everyone could unraise their hand, that would be great. We're gonna share another. So no matter how hard I try, I'll never be good enough. If you've ever thought that, raise your hand. Number keeps going up and up and up. I think I see 9 right now. I'm not checking if people have their real hands raised, but that's awesome. So if you could put your hands down, we'll go for a third one. I won't do that thing that I would want to do, because if I do it, people will see how imperfect I am. If you thought that before, raise your hand. Again, we have a lot of people raising their hands. So we have about a dozen right now, and I can't see the faces, so it could be more. But yeah, I think we've got the hang of it. I hope you'd all agree. I think it's time for breakout rooms, Judy. So you're just going to take turns going around doing that exact same thing and then raising your hands.
All right, so I'm pausing to start your recording again.
Oh, thank you. I totally forgot to remind you. I was going to say, don't forget to remind Judy, but oh wait, did you start it? Is that
I did.
Oh, God.
So that part's now on the recording.
Yes. Okay. I hope that activity was as fun and exciting and productive for you guys as it was for me in my breakout room. I hope you had some good conversations, bonded over some things that you had in common, some little gremlin bad thoughts that you all had together. So my breakout room had a little sneak peek of this next slide, but we're going to talk about why are you even here? Why am I even having this workshop in the first place? It's because I'm tired of traditional imposter syndrome workshops. As a woman in computer science who is part of a women in computer science group who goes around to different tech companies for field trips pretty much, we hear about imposter syndrome a lot. It's a conversation that occurs a lot from women to women in tech because the odd one out is so amplified in our field. So I hear a lot of these talks and they're all the same. And they're so anecdotal and they're just not as productive as I'd want them to be. It's just people sharing their life stories and then being like, this is what I did, so here you go. And there's often very little variety between the people having these conversations. And what I mean by that is, I'm going to give a very specific example. So I attended the Canadian Celebration of Women in Computer Science conference in November, and it's a conference for undergrad students. And we actually have the pleasure of being joined by one of the panelists right here, right now, who is on the imposter syndrome panel. So I have to be really careful about what I say. But basically, it was just all these super duper successful women who weren't undergrads, who some of them were in university, some of them had like PhDs, some of them had masters, some of them just were like out in the workforce being VPs and everything. And they were so successful and it was so great to hear from them. But the target audience wasn't super reflected in that panel. And that just kind of made my blood boil a bit because I just want a nice, productive workshop that just tells me how to fight this thing, you know, that everyone feels. So this is what we're going to do. We're going to get our fists out and we're going to talk about fighting imposter syndrome. So this is my take on improving imposter syndrome conversations. I'm going to first outline like a broke idea or belief that is like comes up often in conversations about imposter syndrome. And I'm going to replace it with an alternative woke, fresh new idea, a new take on this tired, stale, boring imposter syndrome solution. Okay, we ready for this? So to start us off, I'm going to start with like broke-ish because they hold some merit, but sometimes they're not too great. So the very first one is the saying, fake it till you make it. I'm going to try so very hard not to rant right now because I feel very strongly about this, but saying fake it till you make it to someone who already feels like an imposter just reinforces in their mind, consciously or subconsciously, that they are a fraud. The nature of the phrase, the very words in it, is my English minor showing, it indicates or implies fraudulence. And I think that's disastrous if you say that to someone who feels feelings of imposter syndrome, because you, an external source, are reinforcing the evil thoughts of the imposter syndrome gremlins that live in their mind. And that's not productive at all. It's also super disastrous if someone, let's say in management, were to say that to someone they managed. Like power dynamics can come into play. Or if a professor said it to their student, or if a co-op advisor said it to an employee, student, I don't know what the term is, the phrase can be super damaging. That being said, I call it broke-ish because I know a lot of people who say fake it till you make it to themselves, and they live by it as like an internal mantra to just help them power through sort of a feeling of imposter syndrome. And I think that's fine. You know, like it's not great. You're still reinforcing in your mind the fact that you are a fraud, and that's not productive. But if you're using it to get through sort of greater feelings of imposter syndrome, I think that's good. But there's a difference between you telling yourself you're a fraud because you already think that, than someone else saying, hey, you, fraud. Just fake it till you make it. Just do that. So my woke take on this is you've already made it. Look at where you are. You've got this. You've done so good. You've gotten to the point that you're at, and you can just keep going. The next one, write down a list of your accomplishments and refer back to them. That's something, honestly, that you could put on the free space of an imposter syndrome panel bingo card because it comes up so often. And when someone says that to me, I imagine me weeping. And then I'm weeping and I pull out like my diary from the 6th grade and I read a line, won award for social studies. And then I'm like magically healed. And I'm suddenly great again. Like that's just the scenario that plays in my mind when someone suggests that I do that to get over imposter syndrome. I know it's super exaggerated. That's just how I am. But I don't think it's super productive. I think there's a more productive version of this, and that's celebrate your accomplishments when they happen and refer back to that celebration. So what I mean is that for me, at least, it's easier to remember a happy emotion and use that happiness or like the memory of like a happy time to like sort of spin you out of an imposter syndrome spiral. Like that is easier than just reading words on a page and attributing value to it. And what I mean by a celebration, it's super simple. Texting your mom, your partner, your dad, your brother, your dog, your friend. Texting someone saying, hey, I did this cool thing. And then they might respond and be like, oh my God, great. You know, and then you can remember, oh my God, my mom thought I did a great job on this assignment. Or, oh, my partner is really proud that I got the groceries today. Just doing little things and remembering those little celebrations can really help you. And another example, like you could have your favorite snack after doing something really stressful. You could have a bag of chocolate covered almonds waiting for you after giving a Zoom webinar. That's just a very vague example. You could have a little drinky poo after doing something super noteworthy. Just treat yourself and just remember and like kind of stay in the moment and enjoy that success so that you can go back to that. Okay, that's my first round of advice, and that's the broke-ish stuff. Because like I said, the stuff on this slide, they still hold some value, but they're kind of tired and outdated. It's 2020, so gotta give you the new ones. Okay, here are some more with the best picture ever for imposter syndrome. Okay. Ooh, this is another one I could rant about for ages. So I hear at almost every single imposter syndrome thing, channel your stress into productivity and use that productivity to do things that will get you promoted. And I'm sitting here thinking, okay, we know more successful people feel more imposter syndrome. So if I do something to get me promoted, is that really going to help or does that hinder? Furthermore, that to me just sounds like running from the problem, like just zooming away. We're not confronting it at all. We're just avoiding the problem and making it worse. Woo! And people give that as advice as at imposter syndrome presentations. And I feel like it's advice on how to make it worse. Like, you know, it's awful. Calm down. You can't run from your problem. You have to fight it. So yeah, and then I hear advice that says create a positive environment for yourself. And I would consider this brokish as well. But to sort of combine the channeling your stress thing and creating your positive environment thing into one woke idea, channeling your stress into empathy or at least productivity to make the world, or maybe not as big as world, but workplace, school place, classroom, friend group, a more positive environment for yourself and others. We just came from that activity where you hung out with 4 or 5 other people who you may not have known before, but who had super similar thoughts to you. Imposter syndrome is so prevalent. So why don't you do what you can to minimize it for others as well as yourself? For example, at my last co-op workplace, I created this Slack channel called the Celebration Station. And every time one of like your teammates did something fun and exciting, you would just put a little message on the Celebration Station, like, "Oh my God, kudos to this person for doing this," and then everyone would respond with like happy emojis, and like it was so colorful and pretty and like exciting, and it was just like such a positive time. And so little things like that, like you don't have to like make big changes, but doing what you can to make like your environment a more positive place can have like super big impacts on like your feelings of imposter syndrome, because like you're creating something, but also others. Okay, next slide. Okay, a lot of people say just channeling your stress into XYZQW. Whew, why don't we slow down? Why don't we just give ourselves a break, forgive ourselves, be kind to ourselves? I feel like in the workplace we are so hard on ourselves, and in other aspects of life too, and we're our own worst critic. So I think we just need to take a step back, take a deep breath, and give ourselves a break. Okay, here's another piece of advice that comes up super often. They say, surround yourself with people who lift you up. And, you know, I think that's pretty good advice, but imposter syndrome is your own problem in your own mind. So you can use people to help you feel your fight against it, but you can't use them as a crutch to like carry you along. You have to learn how to fight it yourself, or else it's never going to go away and it could just end up getting worse. So yeah, remember the good vibes, get other people to celebrate you, remember everyone's support. Here's one last tip. It was an activity, but we don't really know each other. There's some strangers in the rooms, but I super suggest that you do this with your coworkers or with your family or just whoever, classmates, whatever you want to do. It's called give a compliment, get a compliment. And so you have to obviously give someone a compliment, and that can help someone's imposter syndrome, but you also have to like get a compliment, and that can be really hard because I know a lot of people just deflect compliments. They say, okay, yeah, but you're better, or like, oh yeah, but you're also really good at this, or well, thank you, but you're actually wrong, I'm not good at this at all and I'm faking it, right? Sometimes just saying thank you is the hardest thing to do after receiving a compliment. So this may sound easy, but it can actually be quite challenging just to be complimented and just say thanks. When I did it with people who were super close to each other, everyone's faces were like bright red, and it was really uncomfortable, and I super suggest it because it's so much fun. So yeah, you should definitely try this out after this workshop. Give a compliment, get a compliment. And yeah, that's pretty much it. It's not super long, but I hope that it can be super helpful. We have time now for any final thoughts. If you want me to elaborate on anything, it's really up to you.
So just remember, we can't hear you unless you unmute your mic. Or type in the chat, in which case I'll read what you type. So I'll tell you one thing, Julia. I haven't told you this, but years ago, a different Julia and I had an agreement that if one of us complimented the other and the person deflected it, we had to put a loonie in a jar on my desk. And then by the end of the semester, we had so many loonies. So yeah, it's a good way to collect money to go for drinky poos, is if you put a loonie in a jar every time you deflect a compliment. I highly recommend it.
And then you go celebrate your accomplishments.
And then you go celebrate your accomplishments. Julia, I'm going to steal the screen share from you if that's okay.
Oh, thank God. Yeah.
So I just like to thank you guys for coming. you can still hang around and chat for as long as you want. If you'd like a copy of the slide deck or you want to engage in a longer conversation, you can email me. Julia, do you want me to put your email address up there?
Yeah.
Okay. Or you can email Julia. And we're both happy to visit or entertain other ideas. I threatened Julia with taking her on the non-road roadshow in our COVID world, where we just do it from the comfort of our whatever we're sitting on now. Anyways, so yeah, that's kind of at the end. I will leave that up for a few minutes, and I'm going to turn the recording off, maybe.
I would just like to thank you both for organizing this and for talking about this. So here's, you can practice accepting a compliment.
Thank you.